Okay, my name's Craig Gurney, and the module that I'm teaching is called Society, Diversity and Planning. It looks at the interconnections or the interrelationship between society and space. And it does that for the purpose of both planning and geography, to understand what those interactions might mean at the local level. So it's a module which is informed by the academic discipline of sociology, but it's not a theory module. It's not a kind of dry theory module. So what we do is we look at contemporary social problems, social issues that we see in the news and in the newspapers every day, and we try and make sense of this. We try and look for explanations. So it's not driven by theory, we're using theory to explain things. Let's just take the example of social class. People talk about social class in everyday terms all the time. And there's a big debate about whether it's still a useful concept. Well, it seems to me that it's in a society where the wealthiest 1% of the population own 23% of the total wealth in the country, that it seems to me that it's inescapable to not think about issues of social class. Now, what's interesting about that is that in recent years there's been some really fascinating development in the way in which we think about social class and the way we measure it. So it's not just about the job you do, it's about the type of friends you've got, your education, the type of leisure activities you've got, your network of friends, what you do in your spare time. So there's been interesting stuff there about meritocracy and about cultural capital. Now, these are the kind of the jargon terms that we'll talk about in more detail in the module. Okay, there's kind of 7 kind of big topics that the module covers. The first one is issues to do with social stratification and social exclusion. It's looking at the way in which contemporary British society is structured. What are the kind of building blocks, and why is it that different groups of people get different shares of the overall cake, if you like. And then we break that down. So moving on to the second, third, fourth things, we're going to look at inequalities in relation to gender. Why is it that women and men traditionally and continue to earn different rates of pay, kind of concentrated in certain types of occupation? We're going to look at inequalities in relation to ethnicity and race. In particular, we're going to look at the growth of so-called plural cities, looking at the spatial patterning, segregation and congregation of different groups within cities and within neighbourhoods. We're going to look at issues to do with cultural capital and social capital, new ways of thinking about inequalities in contemporary society. We're going to look at the riots, the 2011 riots, massively important in terms of contemporary, understanding contemporary kind of social problems. Trying to understand why those happened, what happened, what the government's response was to those, and why those were different or similar to similar events that happened in the early 80s. We're also going to look at the role of consumption in people's lives. Often sociologists, because this is a module which is informed by sociology, although it's not a theory module, very often sociologists look at production. They look at what happens in the workplace, what people make and the jobs they do. The last 20, 30 years there's been a massive growth of interest in the importance of consumption, the importance of consumption in relation to people's identity, the types of clothes they wear, the types of music they listen to, the types of things they do in their leisure time. And also looking at the difference that the types of goods that we consume have an impact upon other forms of inequality. So whether you're a homeowner or a tenant, for example. And finally, this is the bit that I always really enjoy, and I think students enjoy it a lot as well, is we look at the way in which we can make sense of cities by looking at contemporary culture. So, and particularly pop culture. So we'll look at film, we'll look at fiction, we'll look at art, we'll look at music. So we'll look at kind of Plan B, Ill Manners, in terms of thinking about that as a piece of music which talks about inner city deprivation and social exclusion and violence. We'll look at books like Pigeon English. We'll look at films like Attack the Block, which present particular visions or particular images, particular constructions of what it means to live in a British city. So it's not just dry stuff, there's kind of interesting contemporary stuff as well.